So my name's Kathy Jenkins. I've been asked to chair this meeting on behalf of the Edinburgh Trades Council kind of COVID committee. I'm a member of Unite, and I'm the Secretary of Scottish Hazards, which is a health and safety activist campaign. Tonight is about really looking at the issues that are being raised as we go along by COVID in relation to work and life, but mainly work, and also to look maybe a little bit at the future and what we can expect, what we can work for in terms of the world of work. But it's mainly to look at the issues right now. So we've got 4 speakers, and I will, you know, we're a fairly small number, so we'll do it fairly informally, and I'll ask if there's any questions after each speaker, but keep discussion points to the end, so that we have a bit of time for proper discussion. So I will, the 4 speakers are Claire Robertson, who is a primary school teacher and a member of EIS, and also the Trades Council chair, I believe, at the moment. And Nikki MacDonald, who is also a teacher. Then we'll have hopefully David Martyn, who is a solicitor from Thompsons Solicitors, to give us a perspective from the kind of cases that are coming up for lawyers. And then Des Loughney, who's the Secretary of Trades Council. So can I turn over to you, Claire?
Yes, thank you very much, Kathy, and thanks to everybody for being here tonight. As Kathy's told you, I'm a primary school teacher in Edinburgh, and I just wanted to give you a flavour of some of the things that we're still having to deal with, as well as teaching and learning. So just slightly before the summer holiday, we had 2 primary 7 classes, and they both had to isolate. Both classes, full classes, went into isolation because there was a suspected, well, there was a positive case of COVID. So that meant it was a very sad end, because, you know, we love our pupils in our school, and for them to finish their primary 7 at home, not able to see their friends for the last time before some of them went off to different high schools, was really difficult. We followed the guidance. We didn't allow any parties or anything. Some of us delivered high tea to the children that were in their house, but it was really not the end of their primary career that they wanted. But then we came back after the summer and things had changed. Test and Protect took over from our school staff in identifying positive cases. And because there was such a surge in cases and case numbers at the beginning of term, everything really slowed down. Test and Protect were not quick in informing the school when parents had phoned in or had a positive case, or the children had a positive case. So the school was slow in finding out what was happening. Then we were also not able to tell that the whole rest of the class, because we were waiting for them, where we had the information from parents phoning us, and we felt like they were holding us up, really. We also couldn't tell members of staff, which seemed ridiculous, just waiting for Test and Protect to confirm cases. And this raised anxiety for everybody in school, for all school staff. Sometimes in primary schools, children need support in order to listen. Some children need to be held to be able to stop and listen to instructions. And the rest of the class need that in order to be able to concentrate on what's going on. And some of our teachers were very young, and in fact hadn't been double vaccinated at that point. So to be told later on what had happened was really stressful. But then the guidance changed again, and we found that nobody in school was ever going to be classed as a close contact again, unless you were living in the same house as somebody with a positive case, or had had close personal, intimate contact. So that was another change, with, you know, pupils being held by their teachers the next day, finding out that they had a positive case of COVID, and nobody having to be told or go off for quite a long time, and teachers not having to go off at all. In one of our classes, at one point, we had up to 9 pupils self-isolating to various degrees. Some kids were asymptomatic, didn't know they had COVID and still were at school. And then, of course, the virus takes its time to show itself in children. So, you know, the children felt fine and didn't realise, and it wasn't until maybe a week, 10 days later, that they themselves had a positive case. So that continued for a long time with that particular class that I'm thinking of, and affected them really badly, with the amount of worry for everybody that what was going to happen. And of course, all these children have siblings in the school as well, so they were all still at school, and it was just very, very worrying at the time. So then later this term, we've had new guidance telling us that we can get away with bubbles. We can get rid of bubbles. We don't have to have bubbles at all. Now, for those not in school, a bubble is a class. So we had been working really hard over the last year, previous year, to keep our classes separate, to not mix the children at all. So of course that made us a little bit worried as well. But our school, and I can only really tell you about my school, we were quite cautious in that approach, because mixing the children all back in the dining hall to have their lunch or to have an assembly, we felt it was too soon to do that. We were still too worried to do it. It also meant that the teachers who had been using the dining hall had to find a new place to have their lunch. So that was another thing that had to be organised. Luckily, we had another space. So far, we cautiously moved the children back together to have their lunches, because of course it's important for them to have their hot lunch, not in their classroom anymore, but back at a table. We've kept primary 1 to 2 together, and so on, to try and minimise contact throughout the school. And our numbers are going down. But we have still got high anxiety, and a number of parents who are phoning the school to find out what's best to do. Shall I send my child in? They've got a cough. And we have to say to them, well, look, we're going to be phoning you and telling you that you have to take your child away to get a PCR test because they've got a new and persistent cough. It's what we have to do. So that's quite a difficult situation to still be in. With ventilation in the school, I'm working really hard as part of the Health and Safety Committee to establish a control pattern. We're thinking the weather's getting colder, what are we going to do? So up to this point, we've had all the windows open, but we can't do that throughout the winter. We've got kids in our school that don't have appropriate clothing. So, you know, they don't have extra layers that they can put on in the school. So we've got this control going. We're putting the monitors into classes, but we're looking at data every day, trying to find the peaks of when the highest levels of CO2 are in the classrooms, and wondering what we can do about that throughout the winter. It is quite a lot of work, to tell you the truth, and I'm using what we call non-contact time, which I should be using for my planning and preparation for my pupils, to actually monitor CO2. And I just feel I'm not an expert on CO2. I don't really know what we can do if we have really high numbers, you know. So that's kind of difficult at the moment. Now across the city, I know that there are real high numbers of people off ill. There are lots of staff, I'm talking about PSAs and teachers across the city off, and especially in special schools. So PSAs have been historically really hard to find and keep in special schools. That have to be the salt of the earth kind of people, because they are up against the really challenging work. They have a really hard job to do. It's very difficult, and they are paid very poorly, in my opinion. So keeping people in special schools has been difficult, but at the moment, with so many people off because they are so in such close contact to their pupils and each other, the City of Edinburgh is having to ask the additional support service to come into those schools to cover those absences. Now, the additional support service are the teachers who are employed to support kids with what we call Pathway 3 supports. So I'm a support for learning teacher, I'm at Pathway 2. It's those children that have got real challenging needs. Because of the presumption of mainstream, they're with us, but they really need much smaller groups or one-to-one support in order to learn. So I'm really worried about those children that, you know, we've been through the process of getting a referral done and getting people to support them, and then they can't come into schools because they're covering absences. Meanwhile, Education Scotland announced last week that they plan to start their scrutiny of schools through inspections again. And as you can imagine, you know, with so many people off, and we're still recovering, just finding out what COVID's done to our pupils and their learning. The EIS think that this shows how out of touch Education Scotland are, and that it's a retrograde step. So I'm sorry if I sound really moany tonight. I'm just trying to give you a flavour of all the different things that is happening and all the changes that we've had to make throughout this very short 2 months of being back at school. So thanks, that's really what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Claire. You're not moaning, but it's hard to hear all that. It must be much harder to live through it. But thank you so much. You've given us a really clear picture. Can I just ask if there's any, as I said, we'll keep proper discussion till the end, but is there anybody that would like to ask Claire any questions? Or I don't Ian.
Thanks, Cathy. Yeah, thanks for that, Claire. As you know, I've been monitoring the school situation very closely, and been getting the daily figures twice a day since we came back on the 16th of August this year, and it is really worrying. I was at a head teachers meeting yesterday. If I could just ask you, without saying anything about that, meeting, could I just ask you how yourself and your colleagues and the staff, the school staff, are feeling? What are your anxieties like? What are your concerns, and how is the head teachers actually trying to alleviate or work with you to try and support you in your concerns? Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. Truthfully, we feel undervalued, that our health isn't as important as keeping people at work. We feel thrown under a bus. That kind of feeling, that kind of talk happens a lot at school. I was telling you that we had to change. We don't have a staff room where there's too many of us, we can't fit in our staff room. So, I mean, at my school, we were lucky enough to have a small hall, which drama used to take place. So, you know, it's a hall. So I've had to move all the furniture out of the staff room, put it 2 meters apart, all the chairs, put tables in there, try and get urns for the people to have a cup of tea in a hall. You know, there's no water there. There's no hot water for making a cup of tea. And, you know, it's really not good enough for my staff. They work so hard, and, you know, It's really difficult. My head teacher, she is working really hard as well, and she's very worried about an inspection coming, and so that she is putting a bit of pressure on us about that, and there's a lot of chat about it, and we just feel that that is a pressure that it's too soon for that to happen. I mean, how, you know, as you know, I'm part of the Health and Safety Committee. How can we do a risk assessment to allow 6 inspectors to come in to, you know, to go into a classroom? We haven't got enough space for 30 kids, a teacher and a PSA. How can we have additional inspectors in there and keep ourselves safe? You know, just that sort of practical issue is really difficult.
And that's what was being raised at that head teacher meeting yesterday. If I could just let other colleagues, Claire, know what the extent of the school situation is. The figures for tonight since the 16th of August for positive cases is 3,679.
Is that for Edinburgh, Ian?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that. Can I just say there's another question in the chat for you, Claire, which I think we'll take now because it's a direct one to you. It's from Carmen, who says that in Spain, primary school children wear masks in school. Is that something that's been considered here?
No, I don't think so. I know certainly in secondary schools there was chat about it, but not in primary school.
Okay.
I mean, we have to, we wear our mask, our teachers go in, put the mask on everywhere. You're walking in the school, you've got your mask on, but as soon as you go into your class and you're ready to teach, your mask's off.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, thank you for that. I don't see any other hands at the moment, so I think we'll move on to Nikki. Nikki is somebody who is a teacher but also has lived experience with long COVID and is going to tell us a bit about it. Thanks, Nikki. Over to you.
Hello, hi there, Claire. Thank you so much for actually summarising things so very well. Really helpful. In fact, I can only mirror what you've said, to be honest. So I'll try to avoid repetition. But the fact is that I do feel exactly the same. All of the same things that Claire has said, we are experiencing in our school too, which I guess is of cold comfort in a way. I am the EIS rep for our school. I'm also the health and safety rep, like yourself, Claire. The positive cases at the end of, excuse me, and actually this is part of long COVID, is my voice. The positive cases at the end of term it was awful. The pupils. And the year before, the pupils, because I've been teaching P7, pupils didn't get closure. And they needed closure. And I think that's important to go back and make sure the kids get the chance to have that kind of, go back to the primary school and visit it, because it was a traumatic end to the year, one nobody could have visualized. And like Claire said, I do think that staff, all school staff have been rather thrown under the bus, because basically everything was opened up. It's like we need to get life back to normal. The cost of that has been significant. I've now had COVID twice, and I do have long COVID. Now, I'm not saying that's due to my work. I'm saying that it's because, for various reasons, I'm a reasonably fit person, but it's had very significant effects on my health. Now, I'm a good example in that my head teacher and staff are incredibly supportive. I think if you want to see something going right, it's gone right for me. Just yesterday, I was at the hospital getting an update on respiratory stuff, but I've had appointments with occupational therapy. My working time has been adjusted accordingly. I have a microphone in my classroom, so because my voice goes, I can use that. It's been great. However, what I do see also is a significant effect, very significant effects on learners and on all staff. And I worry about senior leadership team, because they are carrying a huge load. And it feels like it feels like there are two fights going on. There's the fight against COVID, and there's a fight against people wanting to push things forward too quickly. And that ties in with the HMIE issue. And that seriously needs some stopping significantly. Like Claire, there's chat. Our school is certainly up for an inspection very soon. I've already had discussions with my head teacher about the possibility of that. And she's very, my head teacher is extremely understanding of situations, but she's also under that kind of the hammer of potentially an inspection. It's simply not possible. In fact, I would argue it's actually harmful. I mean, inspection is always stressful. In these circumstances, it's just unreasonable, and it could cause serious harm to staff. I mean, we all remember the case where the head teacher, well, I'm sure some of you will, the head teacher was under such pressure that she took her own life, and that was without COVID. This is an unacceptable pressure and needs to be seriously challenged. I mean, I'm going to work. I'm sick most mornings. I have a long-term ear infection that's been going on since June. And I'm going to work because I love my job and because I'm supported. And that's why I go. But there are lots of staff, I understand, across Edinburgh who maybe aren't experiencing the same level of support and should be and are entitled to be. What else can I say? Yeah, the high levels of anxiety amongst our staff, it's unprecedented. People feel overwhelmed already. And the engagement with learning with our learners is very challenging. We're supporting them as best we can in quite constrained situations. It's a very fast moving and challenging situation. The ventilation thing, yeah, absolutely. All these kind of things, we're trying to manage so many balls in the air right now, and just taking care of things. And the other aspect also is, I'm very aware that FLT are dealing with, is trying to get hold of, oh, nice cat. Trying to get hold of supply staff. Sometimes they can be like hen's teeth. I mean, we're just so welcoming of supply staff. So that's a workforce issue. I'm not sure there's anything else I can add to what Claire said so well earlier on.
Thank you so much, Nikki. That's really, again, put us really in the picture of what it's like. And it's, can I just say, from a hazards point of view, it's wonderful to hear about a situation where somebody in your position is getting such good support, because that's, like you said, it's what we need.
Thank you. Yes, and have the right to.
Yeah, and I think half the time we only hear about the bad situations, not the good ones. So it's lovely to hear something positive. Do people have any questions for Nikki before we move on? No, well, we can come back to her after we've had the other speakers. So thank you again. Right, now I would like to introduce David Martyn, who was here a minute ago. I think he's just disappeared.
I'm still here, Cathy.
Okay,
yeah.
I just missed your face. David is from Thompsons Solicitors and has been one of the solicitors that have been very supportive to Scottish Hazards, and I know a lot of other people throughout the pandemic and before. David's very kindly said that he would come and a perspective from the point of view of the kind of issues that are rising for them at Thompsons. So thank you very much, David. Over to you.
Sure, no problem, Cathy. And my apologies. I got a slightly panicked email from Des saying, "Are you joining us tonight, David?" And I have to entirely hold my hands up here with a slight family emergency with I was having to use my cross-examination skills on my children as I had a call from the school. They had been involved in some form of incident. So I've just been in the process of cross-examining my children for the last half an hour over something that happened at school. So I finally got to the bottom of it, you'll be glad to hear. And yeah, so my apologies if I'm a little bit late for joining in. And unfortunately, they were guilty is the answer to that's my judicial determination.
I think we've all been there.
Yes, I have. So I think probably just useful to give you a kind of overview of some of the things that we've been working on. I don't think there's any, I think probably at this time of night, nobody wants me to go into the the thickets of discrimination law, but really just to give you an overview of the sorts of cases we've been dealing with and the responses that we've been giving to people, and give you a bit of information about what you can do to support members and to sort of share information that might be helpful in relation to some of the issues that are coming up. And also my apologies, because I'm aware a couple of you will probably have heard me talk about this before, because it's something that we are talking to a lot of unions and charities about at the moment. A couple of things, and I think long COVID and how we might address some of the issues arising from long COVID, and maybe vaccination and some of the issues around vaccination and how we address some of the competing legal duties in relation to vaccination, and particularly sort of compulsory vaccination and dismissals. So I think we're all aware of long COVID and I suppose the increasing awareness within employer circles of the existence of long COVID and the effects that it can have on the workplace. And broadly speaking, we're seeing employees impacted in a variety of different ways, ranging from physical symptoms, fairly severe lung damage and difficulties with cardiovascular systems, ranging through to, extreme fatigue, nerve issues, and also mental health issues and anxiety, depression related to long COVID and the condition. So we're seeing a range of conditions which can impact people. These conditions are obviously variable in terms of they can come on. Some of those conditions can come on and then get better for a period of time and then come back on again. So they are intermittent in terms of their the symptoms, and it can make it difficult for employers to really understand how they should be dealing with absences related to long COVID. So to try to work through what we should be doing in terms of supporting employees, for me, the first thing to think about is, let's think of long COVID as in relation to any other form of sickness absence. The most important thing to explain to members is look at your own sickness absence policy and ensure that reporting requirements are strictly adhered to, because reporting absence is still something which employers will raise disciplinary actions in relation to if absences are not properly reported. But also importantly, look at sickness absence pay within individual contracts. That's something that we need to be the masters of those terms, and making sure that employers are paying sick pay when it is due. Where there is a discretion in relation to the payment of sick pay, it's important that we are trying to persuade employers to exercise their discretion to pay full sick pay when they have a discretion to do so. That's important because to some extent, whether a discrimination claim is going to be successful in relation to sick pay will depend on whether there is a discretion, and we have a greater likelihood of being successful in a discrimination claim if there is discretion and there's an active decision to be made. The sorts of factors that should be borne in mind are things like, did you pick up, or is there a likelihood that you picked up the illness when at work? And if so, if it's an occupational injury, then greater care should be taken, or consideration should be given to to extending periods of sick pay in those circumstances. In relation to the return to work, it was a really helpful talk the other night, I think, organised by the ETUC. I think I see Terry there, and Terry, I think we've probably corresponded with this already in relation to really helpful information about who we should be engaging with, whether it's occupational help or occupational therapists. And I was really taken by comments around how important it is in these circumstances for some form of occupational therapy input, where the nature of the condition can be quite amorphous. It might be something that's recurring. It may manifest itself in a variety of different ways. And what we need to do is really make sure that there's a proper assessment of the individual job, a proper assessment of the condition, and creative solutions are proposed which would allow that person to remain in the workplace. So, trying to look beyond just flexible working or, in removing physical barriers to the workplace, for example. Examples we've heard in a school recently was an entire class being moved, or a suggestion that an entire class be moved from, say, the 3rd floor to the 1st floor of the building in order to ensure that the teacher didn't have to move to the top, or didn't have to climb the stairs to attend their classroom. And whilst that's quite a big adjustment to be made, it's exactly the sort of adjustment that we would expect an employer to make to bring someone suffering from long COVID into the workplace and allow them to continue to attend work. The big question is going to be, and I think the question you're going to be asked a lot, is long COVID a disability, and a qualifying disability under the Equality Act? The answer to that is unfortunately not yes or no. It's a question that needs to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. Ultimately, the only person who can really determine whether or not somebody is a disabled person for the purposes of the Equality Act is an employment judge, usually at the end of an 18-month litigation. And in some ways that is good, because it allows us to argue that anyone who we say is suffering from a mental or physical impairment, which has a long-term adverse effect on their ability to carry out day-to-day activities, we can argue that that person is disabled. And I think in most cases we should be putting forward that argument. The important thing for me is that the day-to-day activities, that's what we're really looking at. Can this person carry on a normal social life, or is brain fog preventing them from maintaining relationships? And can they run for the bus? Can they get themselves dressed in the morning? Can they cook a meal for themselves, go shopping, that sort of thing? These day-to-day activities, that's where the assessment should be made, not can they carry out the complex duties of their job. The assessment is, can they carry out day-to-day activities? And if they're struggling to carry out day-to-day activities because of an impairment, then we're perfectly entitled to argue that they're disabled. If we say that they're disabled, that usually would put an employer on notice that they have to take into account the full range of discrimination, potential discrimination claims in respect of that individual. The main positive obligation is obviously the duty to make reasonable adjustments. And I think in most cases you would be saying that that would be engaged. Now, obviously, there's a few things to say about the duty to make reasonable adjustments. I think employers are routinely confused about the extent of their obligations under that duty. It is not good enough to say making this adjustment will cause disruption. It is not good enough to say this will be costly to make this adjustment. And that is exactly what the legislation envisages. It envisages disruption being created, and that is the condition that Parliament has put on employers to ensure that we have more disabled people in the workplace. So the obligation goes quite far, and it's something that you can be creative with. The most important thing is speaking to members, speaking to employees and saying, let's look at what is it about your condition that prevents you from usually attending work. That's usually the PCP or the policy that we need to address. And we need to be creative and far-reaching in terms of proposing and suggesting adjustments to the workplace. That may involve adjustments to that individual's duties. It may involve reallocation of duties to colleagues. It may involve flexible working, doing some work from home, doing some work from a different location, changing somebody's office location, for example, so their commute is easier. All of these things are things which we can demand of employers. And I think we're perfectly entitled to do that in respect of long COVID. There is, however, a possibility that it may transpire that somebody who has had COVID, who is still suffering from symptoms, may not qualify as a disabled person. It is not guaranteed. I'm afraid there's no black and white answer. One thing to say is, just because the symptoms have not yet lasted 12 months does not mean that the person cannot qualify as a disabled person, because the test is whether or not the symptoms are likely to last 12 months or more. So we're perfectly entitled to say that they are likely to last 12 months or more. Just because the symptoms come and go does not mean that the person is not disabled. So intermittent symptoms are also covered. And also the last thing, if there is some form of medication which the individual is taking, which ameliorates some of the symptoms of the condition, then the assessment of disability takes place prior to the effects of that medication being felt. So you look at the condition minus the medication to assess whether or not somebody may be covered by the Act. Okay, so in terms of the types of discrimination, I think we're likely to see all the normal types of discrimination that we would see against disabled people. One thing I think we're going to see more often is disability-related harassment. And the reason I say that is because there is still a myth surrounding long COVID in particular, where managers and colleagues do not accept that this is a real condition, and that is a difficulty, because if you are suffering from this condition, which I think is now medically accepted as being a very real condition, and you are suffering from a disability, in essence what you will be experiencing is degrading, offensive, humiliating treatment at the hands of colleagues or managers, if they start to say to you, we don't quite believe that you're actually suffering from this condition. That I think is going to lead to a number of harassment claims. And anecdotally, we've seen a lot of workplaces where people who are reporting long COVID are simply dismissed as malingering and making up their symptoms. Now, where you're seeing cases like that, I think the best way to advance those claims is both through a direct discrimination claim, but I think also through a harassment claim. And I think we'll see significant numbers of examples of that in the future. We are now getting to a stage, I think, unfortunately, where those who have really been ravaged by this illness, and there are many, unfortunately, they will now be getting to the stage where if they've experienced the illness at the beginning of the pandemic, they will probably be coming to the end of their periods of full sick pay, and employers will be beginning to look to dismissal procedures. My understanding is in a lot of particularly public sector employers, there haven't been those capability proceedings. They have been holding off on those capability proceedings, but regrettably, I think they are going to proceed at some point, and we're going to see a number of people who are off with severe long COVID symptoms who simply cannot return to the work without adjustments. We may see capability proceedings against those individuals. I regret if their symptoms are serious enough that they simply cannot return to work, then there may not be much that can be done to protect those individuals from dismissal. The best that can be said is continue to argue if this is an occupationally contracted illness, then if the member is minded to go down the route of receiving some form of severance package, then that can be argued for. If somebody's experiencing a long period of sickness absence where they're not receiving pay, then always remember, and it's important to remember this, that when somebody's off on a period of long-term sickness absence, their holiday pay continues to accrue. So their holiday entitlement continues to accrue. Now, they can take that holiday at any point, even though they are off on sick leave. If they require a boost to their income, they can simply say, as long as they give the requisite period of notice, they can simply book a period of holiday and they would be paid full pay for that. Now, if somebody's been off for 18 months, they're going to have a significant period of holiday entitlement which has been accrued, and that may be a way to provide them with some short-term income. And obviously they should be paid as well in respect of notice, if you can make that argument for them when they're departing. So I think just to summarise in relation to long COVID, what we should be doing is making arguments wherever we can that the individual is disabled, and we should be pushing reasonable adjustments as often as possible. Where there is harassment, we should be pointing it out and really giving very short shrift to anyone who's suggesting that this illness is not real, or that somehow it is not as worthy of respect as other conditions. But ultimately, unfortunately, there may be nothing that can be done in more serious cases. In relation, one of the other issues we're advising on, but I'll be cautious of time, is in relation to vaccination. And I think we all know where the kind of battle lines lie in relation to vaccination. We're now seeing some companies who are requiring employees to undergo compulsory vaccination if they wish to continue to work in the workplace. And obviously I think what the movement in general has been doing has been pushing employers as hard as we can to try to get workplaces as safe as possible. And the difficulty that we're now seeing is some unions are being asked to assist members who do not want to be vaccinated but who want to continue in work. And there's a degree of attention there which is beginning to be created. There are some discrimination issues for employers that they need to take into account. Perhaps less so now, but obviously age is one issue. If employees simply couldn't be double vaccinated because of age, then that's potentially discriminatory on grounds of age. I think we will see most employers will have engaged with those who have disabilities, or, for example, are immunosuppressed, individuals who have not been able to get the vaccine for those reasons. Clearly, policies which did not make exceptions for those individuals would be discriminatory on grounds of disability. I think we may see some cases in relation to sex. Whilst I don't think the medical evidence necessarily indicates that the vaccine can harm chances of conception or are damaging to pregnant women, we may see more women being vaccine hesitant as a result if they're trying to conceive. And so that may again be an issue if that is the reason why the individual is hesitant in relation to the vaccine. We may also see some hesitancy based on religion or ethnic minority, and these tend to be indirect discrimination claims where a blanket policy is applied to everybody, but yet it has a disproportionate effect on one particular protected group. We haven't seen those sorts of claims coming through as yet, but we may see them at some point. Ultimately, in relation to vaccination, we've started to see some care workers, I think in Dundee, dismissed. That was reported a couple of weeks ago. Now, we haven't been asked to advise on the individual cases. It will depend on the individual cases. Has the employer ticked all the boxes, gone through the process, properly consulted, understood the individual's reason for not wanting to be vaccinated, taken that into account, assessed any potentially discriminatory impacts? If they've done all of those things, if they have also looked at other measures to mitigate risk, for example, increased testing or other workplace measures that could be implemented to prevent the risk of infection. One thing we once heard recently was
I'm wondering if you could wind up soon.
Yeah, sure.
We all want to hear what you have to say, but sure. there'll be time for questions and everything. Yeah,
I'll not get into so much, but we've obviously seen some examples of vaccination dismissals, and those just need to be assessed on an individual case-by-case basis. It is going to be difficult. I think it will be easier for the employer to justify where there are real risks to service users or vulnerable individuals in the workplace, less easy to justify where there is less risk. Other solutions, though, should be, for example, just wait. If somebody's not prepared to be vaccinated at the moment, there's no need to dismiss them just now. They could simply be suspended, and you could look at the overall health risks at a future date. So broadly speaking, those are the two issues. A couple of cases we've run. I mean, one case that we did for FBU recently, which was successful, which was helpful, was where Scottish Fire and Rescue had been obliging people who were shielding to use their toil and holiday pay to effectively cover the period when they were shielding, and we raised indirect discrimination claims on grounds of both disability and sex for those individuals, and that was successful in the Employment Tribunal on the grounds of disability. But unfortunately, we didn't win any compensation in that case. So that matter will be appealed, but that's the first sort of case that's coming through. There hasn't been much case law really coming through because it obviously takes about 18 months for us to see the first cases coming through. So broadly speaking, that's what we've been up to, and that's what we've been advising on, and more than happy to answer any questions that anyone's got.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to cut you off because we could listen to all this. It's really helpful to hear all this. Does anybody have a question for David just now?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment to make, which unfortunately I got cut off halfway through, David, but thank you. It's so interesting to hear what you're saying. But my comment is that as someone who is still experiencing long COVID and is ill and luckily very much supported by my manager, that's great. But if you hit barriers when you're feeling as unwell as you do, and you feel rather, as I have, very, very ill, like it's hard to have a shower or whatever, trying to bash against that door is incredibly difficult. And I wonder what can be done to take that, because if it weren't for my family and friends, I wouldn't be able to kind of keep going. It's an uphill battle, and it's another barrier. Because when you're talking about you know, this needs to be done, this needs to be done, but when your brain is fogged, you can't get out of bed for months. It's exhausting. Yeah. But it's so important that you can. And the only reason I'm here now is because I've had that support. And I'm worried about the folk who don't have that support. So I wonder what support could be given by ETUC or anybody.
I mean, for me, it's trade unions. That's what trade unions are, you know, and the organisation on the ground. This is where trade unions come into their own, and those networks on the ground, and being able to give a voice to those who, exactly as you've described, cannot speak for themselves because of what the disease has done to them. So I'm afraid there's no particular structural support that can be offered. Access to work is something that you could look at if that is if funding is an issue, and there can be inputs from access to work to assist someone to return. But that may be structurally the only thing, you know. And I think it's really just raising awareness. And obviously I know there's the COVID inquiries due to take place next year. And I think it's important that these sorts of issues are ventilated during that inquiry, so that employers and government are made aware of the ongoing needs of those suffering from long COVID.
Thank you. I think it's very hard to understand unless you are either in it or experiencing it or have. It's certainly been one of the biggest challenges of my life. Oh, kick it. I'll
Thanks. Thanks, Nikki. Ian, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Kath. And thanks, David. It's in relation to what you were saying about claims proving it was workplace related. I actually believe that the Scottish Government and the Health Protection Scotland guidance is fundamentally flawed. Both my wife and sister-in-law are PSAs in special needs schools, and my sister-in-law caught COVID earlier this year, one of 14 cases in a special needs school, all within 1 week. The problem that we've got, and I've argued this all along, is that Health Protection Scotland's guidance to all local authorities is that all positive COVID-19 cases are community-based. They are therefore recorded on the databases as being community-based, and they're not therefore reported to the HSE under RIDDOR. So that's the real crux of the matter for local authorities. And I think as well that, you know, it's not helpful that local authorities will not deviate from Health Protection Scotland or the Scottish Government guidance. I think we should have more of a say, because we know the workplaces in Edinburgh, we've had higher rates of COVID, one of the highest rates of COVID in Europe over the last month or so. Thanks, I'll leave it there, Kath. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
I mean, just on the have you picked up this illness at work issue and the possibility of personal injury claims? It's no surprise that government agencies are trying to classify all cases of COVID as being non-workplace related and as being community-based, because obviously if those cases are contracted in the workplace, then there is a possibility of a claim for injury, like any other occupational illness or disease. If the illness is contracted at work and there has been negligence on the part of the employer in terms of the measures that we put in place to prevent exposure to that pathogen, then there is potential liability on that employer. We probably have in the region of, I think it's about 300 or 400 claims, or possibly even more than that, where we are satisfied that we will be able to establish that the infection was not community-based and that it's based in the workplace, and we will be taking legal action against the employers and their insurers because of the exposure which took place at work. So, you know, these claims are difficult. There's no getting around that, because if you travel on a busy train or a busy bus to work, then it's going, you know, the first thing the employer is going to say is, well, look, we think you got it on the bus. And, you know, it's that can be difficult as a matter of evidence to get around, but it doesn't mean there's not necessarily any claim. Looking at somebody else, if somebody has been really, really careful, and will give evidence to say that they were really, really careful when they weren't at work, they travelled to work by car, you know, or we might think of, for example, a home carer or a residential carer who's going around residential sites, you know, visiting people in their homes, and, you know, they're just in their car all the time. It's very likely they picked it up whilst in work and not somewhere else, and we're very happy to take those cases forward. The other place that we think we've got a number of really good cases is oil rigs, for example. I know they're quite unusual, but there's a number of oil rig cases where there is literally nowhere else they could have picked it up other than their workplace. So we would obviously advance those cases. I mean, they're difficult, but let's not make the employers' arguments for them.
Thanks very much for that, David. That's certainly at Scottish Hazards one of the issues that we want raised in the public inquiry is the whole issue of RIDDOR reporting and the emphasis on community transmission rather than workplace transmission, you know, which has been used not only to not take responsibility, but also to not put the mitigations in place that really needed to be put in place. There's one more question, and you need to move on, but there is one more question in the chat, which is quite a quick one, I think, which says, is reducing someone's hours, but the employer also reducing pay to match a reasonable adjustment fair? We have a member with long COVID, and this is being proposed by the employer.
It can be difficult. I mean, broadly speaking, if you were reducing hours, then you would expect to see pay reduced. There are a small number of cases where, for example, it's been argued that you know, you should extend sick pay policies to, you know, that as an adjustment, adjust the sick pay policy to maintain, you know, to provide somebody with pay. Unfortunately, the legislation is all geared toward bringing disabled people back to work. Now, the way that adjustment would work, if you were reducing their hours, which may allow them to continue in work, the employer's probably only going to be able to do that, or that's only going to be reasonable if there's a consequent reduction in pay as well. So I think it would be hard to argue that you should retain full pay but be able to work reduced hours. I think that would be hard to argue that.
Okay, thank you for that. Tamsin, you have a question, and that's the last one I'm going to take until we move on to the next speaker. So Tamsin.
Hi, David. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. I'm just wondering, how does that relate to NHS staff? And do you have any NHS staff that are cases? Because it must be a lot of staff that have caught COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the example of we haven't seen, you know, if this had been any other illness that they had contracted, we would have seen a slew of capability dismissals taking place. But as far as I understand it, there is still, I don't know whether the Scottish Government had put out guidance or not. I had heard some rumour that they had, which had effectively said, look, do not be dismissing people who have potentially contracted coronavirus whilst carrying out their frontline duties. But I think that is going to come at a point.
Right. Well, okay, thank you so much, David, and
Sure.
we will move on, but you know, there'll be some time at the end for more discussion if people have questions. I want to move on now to Des Loughney, who's the Secretary of Edinburgh Trades Council.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Due to the time, I'm going to really quite truncate what I want to say and just mention 4 points. I'm carrying out this survey of trade union reps and branch officials in Edinburgh about the impact of COVID and long COVID. I'm in the middle of it, and I've got some preliminary results. I'm going to tell you about 4 preliminary results. I want to interview more people, so if there's any reps here today, if they want to be interviewed for an hour confidentially, then get in contact with me. The 4 points I want to make, and I welcome David's input to this, is that some of us members or reps are telling us that employers won't pay the full expenses for home working. And some employers have said to members, well, look at how much money you've saved from travelling to work. You don't have to spend thousands of pounds a year coming from Glasgow to Edinburgh. Therefore, you can cover your own expenses. You've got plenty of cash to do that. Well, that's unlawful. They can't say that. What people spend on transportation has got nothing to do with to and from work. It's got nothing to do with their employer. So I think there are big issues still ongoing about the legal facts that I think employers are duty bound to pay any expenses incurred in carrying out the work or their instructions. I think it's a fundamental legal point. Employers, not all employers are cognizant of that particular sort of legal point. And I think it's something that needs to be addressed by the movement. The second thing is that from talking to people is that employers have not only been caught out by a pandemic, but they've also been caught out by type of risk assessments that are needed in a pandemic. And they found it very difficult, and even up to date, managers and employers aren't properly trained, haven't properly trained themselves in carrying out risk assessments. And I thought that it was generally accepted that people that from Black and ethnic minorities are more susceptible to COVID, and that therefore an employer who has BAEM employees should be carrying out these type of risk assessments. On the whole, they're not. I did come across some examples of where those type of assessments were carried out and they had a positive result. That's not generally the case. And I'm really surprised that the whole movement actually has not taken that up as a point. Special risk assessments for BAEMs and the whole thing about the quality of risk assessments, I still think that's a big issue. Another one that thing I wanted to find out in my survey is if there's any people have developed mental health conditions as a result of COVID specifically, and I found out that is the case. And there have been serious cases of people being sectioned or attempting suicide as a result of isolation or a result of contracting COVID. But there's also been less serious cases too. And I think we need to make a big cultural change to recognise the impact of COVID on mental health of people, and not just the serious cases, but the less serious cases as well. And I don't see anyone gathering statistics of that in Edinburgh or anywhere else in Scotland. But I think it's an issue that's a very serious issue and needs to be developed. And the other final point I want to make is that the simple issue of pay for people off work because of COVID or long COVID. And I've read Scottish Government circulars which say that people who are off work for long COVID are entitled to full pay indefinitely. And I understand from Claire can back me up on this, is that teachers in Edinburgh, if they're off work from COVID or long COVID, are going to have full pay indefinitely. So that seems to be the standard of for Scottish government funded public sector. But I know it's not the standard for civil service that's funded by the UK government. They don't pay full pay if you're ill with long COVID. So I think there's a big legal anomaly there. How is it that one government and another can have different policies regarding full pay on long COVID? And the other thing I want to say is that I'm secretary of a union branch that represents 1,300 people in the voluntary sector, and we cover 70 different employers, and there's a variety of policies. And I would say that paying full pay if you're off ill from COVID or long COVID is not generally the case. But most of these organisations are funded by the City Council. And it's well known that they're on terms and conditions that are inferior to City Council employees. I also want to point out that they're also, the City Council isn't giving third sector organisations in Edinburgh that they fund the money to pay full pay for long COVID, even though they're paying full pay for their own employees who've got long COVID. And so I'm just mentioning this type of issue is that I think it's a big challenge to all of us who represent the third sector, the voluntary sectors, 20,000 of us all together in Edinburgh, but I mean, hundreds of thousands all over Scotland. So I mean, I think it's a big issue vis-a-vis local authorities and Scottish government is that despite saying to NHS workers, you'll get full pay for off COVID, they're not giving the money to either local authorities or the third sector to allow them to do the same. So there's a lot more I could say. I'm just going to leave it there and finally make the point I made at the beginning that I'm happy to interview people, particularly from the private sector actually, but anyone who is a shop steward or a branch rep, if they want to have a discussion about how COVID's impact on the workplace, I'm happy to interview them by Zoom for an hour. Thanks. If anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Des, and thanks for sticking to time so much, less than time so much. I'll just, before I open it to questions, I'll just say that Scottish Hazards in the casework that we've done over the last year and a half have constantly found the problem of risk assessments is, people, employers are not doing COVID risk assessments. Some employers haven't done any risk assessments. They're not doing individual risk assessments for people in a particular risk. And it's been a continuing issue for the people that have come to us who are mainly non-unionized workers. So I'll just say that. Can I open this up now to questions for Des first and then any other discussion points? I don't see any hands, so just
confirm the point about expenses, just to make it absolutely legally clear that employers have to pay expenses if an employee claims them for carrying out the work on behalf of the employer.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I agree with that, Des, and I think you're right that this is not something that has been highlighted, and that applies to electricity costs, contributions to broadband costs, insurance for somebody's home, potentially heating costs. And there's some of those are tax deductible as well. There's certain tax breaks that you can receive on those. I mean, it is. I think more than anything, it's fundamentally a breach of the implied term of trust and confidence if an employer was not to make those payments, particularly in a situation where they have made many employees work from home without any proper variation to their employment contracts.
that's really helpful to get that confirmation.
Yeah.
So other points for any of the speakers, or just generally discussion points? We have 20 minutes, so we've got plenty of time.
Sorry, Kaz, there's a question.
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat, I think from Stuart Preston.
Okay.
I think it's a question. He says an individual risk assessment will be undertaken. They state they are at zero risk at home and will be put at risk in the community by travelling to work in the office, etc. So the employer is put them at risk. I think that's actually that's quite a good point. I mean, for some people, it may be a case they can put forward that if they've got a choice between working at home and working in the office, if they're particularly at risk in terms of if they contracted COVID, I think that's an important argument for saying that they should continue to work at home if that's what they wish.
Okay.
Yeah,
I've got, sorry, David.
I would just say that there is there's limited case law on how far the employer's duty extends outside of the workplace in terms of ensuring health and safety. There is a case, and the name forgets me, I think it was a prison officer, but it related to travel to and from work in a dangerous environment. I think it was a dangerous road, and there was an obligation that was thought to exist on the employer to ensure that risk was taken into account. Now, I think it applies in a number of circumstances. Actually, it applies in COVID-related circumstances. I mean, there's also been some fairly horrendous recent stories highlighted by Unite Hospitality in relation to, for example, late-night workers travelling home from the workplace, working in bars and restaurants, for example, where they could supply taxis, for example, to people to get home, and they haven't done that. And does the obligation exist? So I think it's a really fertile area for us to campaign on, because I think we should be saying that health and safety doesn't stop at the front door of the workplace.
Well, that's a helpful one to hold on to. Yeah. I have three hands up now. Hilary.
Hi, thanks, Kathy. Claire was talking about ventilation, which it does seem to be widely accepted by people who know what they're talking about, that this is a vital component when you're talking about infection. Given the Scottish winter and the impossibility of just keeping the windows open, what should people be fighting for? Should we be arguing for air conditioning, for more heating, given that you have to open the windows, fewer people in the room, because this applies to offices as well as to schools? So I'd like to hear if anybody's got any ideas about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Hilary. Can I just get another question, and then we'll discuss it all and get the speakers to respond. Marilyn.
Hi, sorry, I can never unmute myself. My question actually was exactly the same as Hilary's. She took the words out of my mouth. It was very much to do with ventilation. I don't understand the mechanics of it, but I've read a couple of articles about schools in America and workplaces in America where they have managed to get ventilation in, and some people feel, scientists seem to feel that would and does keep people safe. So that was my question as well. Thanks.
Okay, maybe then we should take that. I know, Ian, you have a question, but can we take this issue of ventilation and see what?
My question is linked in as well.
Oh, right. We'll say that then, Ian.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
It's to Claire and the other teacher colleague specifically, but 2 weeks ago, actually, first of all, I've got to say that the school's operations group that have been working on the SOT document and the risk assessments have probably been the best department I've worked with in this entire pandemic. They are really on the ball. Secondly, I actually wrote to the operations manager 2 weeks ago after speaking to colleagues in hazards, Hilda Palmer, and it was about a HEPA air purification unit. HEPA standing for high efficiency particulate air brackets filter. And basically what it does is it's a unit which sucks in the air in the working environment, sends it through various filters, and then releases fresh air back into the working environment, and it entraps viruses and other bacteria in the filters. And I did a bit of research over the weekend, a couple of weekends ago, and the manufacturers are stating, well, you never always believe manufacturers, but they state it was 99.5 to 99.75% efficient. And I know that Hazards in Manchester have installed 2 units in their head office. Unfortunately, I haven't had a response from our FM team to date, but I have chased them up yesterday. But that might be something that we can use over and above the mitigating safety measures that we have at the moment to bring more fresh air into the working place. And that could go for offices as well as schools. And the other thing is that Claire mentioned the CO2s monitors. We've got nowhere near enough in Edinburgh. We spent £41,000 on them. You've got 5 in secondary schools, 3 in primaries and 1 in nurseries. So we need more of them. Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. Okay, so we've got a major issue about ventilation, which is absolutely key right now. And I mean, it has always been key, but wasn't recognized at the beginning as being key, except by a few people who were shouting into the wind, I think, including Hilda and UK Hazards. So can I just ask, I mean, I could say a few things about this. Could I ask our speakers, David, Des, Claire, if you have any comments about ventilation on top of what you've already said?
I can tell you that over the weeks that I have been monitoring CO2 levels in classes, it is clear the fewer the children,
yeah,
the less high are the readings.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that the peaks are just before lunchtime, 12:24, and the door is opened at 12:30, and the readings come sharply down, and just before the end of the day. So our readings in classes of 30 are the highest, and they're regularly going to 1200, 1300, and we're told that 1400 is the worrying number. So that's useful.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know, David or Des, do you want to come back on this ventilation?
Yeah, the only time it's come up in my own, like the interviews I said I've been doing, the only time it's come up is one of our employers, one of its cases for not going back to a normal working week where you spend 5 days in the office, is having employees only spending 2 days in the office and having that staggered. And that was one of the health and safety reasons they said for the new scheme that we're proposing, was to, you know, better able to deal with like ventilation. But that's just what suited them. I mean, well, the only other case I had of a ventilation issue was a long time ago, but that was a workplace in Edinburgh getting asthma. A lot of people are getting asthma, and we found it's because they opened windows, and it was petrol fumes or particulates from the internal combustion engine were coming through the window and were giving people asthma. Well, how that was resolved was, after we got health and safety input from experts, was that they closed the windows and then they installed air conditioning. Now, I don't know what that would mean, whether that's a solution these days, but obviously be very expensive solution for schools to get that type of system in a school, and all schools in Edinburgh. But I think that, I mean, I haven't read any, something I think we should look into. I haven't actually read any expert views on how one might deal with the ventilation issue as described by Claire in the school.
David?
I think, I mean, one aspect from an employment law perspective that I think we might see this issue arising is I can see that there will be mental health disabilities related to people's reluctance to return to work, particularly stress and anxiety, over a long period of time, which may only be relieved by the employer putting in place appropriate health and safety measures, such as particulate filters into rooms where that individual is going to be working. Because I think, in fact, today we just signed off an agreement for somebody to leave their work because they just could not go back to that workplace, because it was a small office. Colleagues couldn't be relied upon to properly socially distance and mask wear at the appropriate times, and the only sort of measures that would have reassured that person and allowed them to return to work and address their anxieties would have been something like proper ventilation. That's quite an expense, but it's the kind of adjustment that I think we should be asking for.
I'd just like to add that there is a huge amount of information that's been pulled together by Independent Sage, by the UK Hazards, by a range of people about ventilation, which we can certainly circulate. I think the issue, though, is always, as always, things come down to cost. And I think what's happened is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what's happened is COVID has exposed a problem with ventilation. It's not created one. Workplaces have not been properly ventilated in many cases for years, and Des's example shows that. And the just opening windows is not good enough, and opening windows sometimes can make things worse if you're in an area where the pollution levels are high. So we need to look at other mitigations. I'm not an expert in this at all, but I will circulate through Des some information. In terms of, I think the HEPA filters are something that people are talking about more now and are being recommended. The difficulty is you have to then look at the size of the room that you're working in and how many filters you might need. So it's not just a simple, oh, we'll just get one. But I would hope that there would be advice, as you're saying, Ian, in City of Edinburgh Council about that kind of technicality. I know, I honestly think that fewer people in the room is one of the major answers, but I know that that's been discussed in the school system, and so far as I know, they haven't come up with a solution. Not enough classrooms, not enough teachers, probably the ongoing campaign for this would be, let's have smaller classes because it's better for the kids anyway. But I suppose that's more of a long-term thing. I know that purging classrooms is recommended so that you have space between times when the classes are full or workplaces are full, where you open all the windows and try to purge the air as much as you can. But there are, as I say, I will circulate more information about that. But it is the upcoming issue, and I think we all need to keep pushing for good ventilation in workplaces, not just during COVID, but always, because it's an issue with lots of other ill health issues. Anybody else want to come in? We've got a few minutes left.
Can I pick up on the ventilation issue?
Yes, Nikki. Yeah.
To say that certainly in our school, and it's good practice, is that we take a ventilation break once an hour.
Yeah. Okay.
Except today when it was pouring down,
yeah,
and it was a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. Wet breaks with kids are always tricky. They were climbing the ceiling, as I'm sure my colleague Claire could tell you. But so that's where we're looking at tricky situations.
Okay.
Our windows are always open. We open them first thing in the morning, and they're shut last thing at night. But I'm not sure that's going to be enough mitigation in the future.
Yeah, thank you. I think as winter comes in, there are issues obviously around temperature as well. We don't want to make people ill by being hypothermic just because we're keeping the windows open for COVID.
Well, the other thing is obviously that schools in Edinburgh, certainly EIS will say that school temperatures need to be at 16 degrees at least. And as an EIS rep, I've had a number of, just over the city, schools that have had no running water, schools that had no heating.
Yeah.
So that's, it kind of ties into what Des and other.
Yeah. Okay, we've got just 5 minutes left. Ian, you've got your hand up. Is that legacy hand or is that?
No, it's just very quickly, Kath. There is another mitigating circumstance that could impact on schools as well, and that's our colleagues in facilities management, because I'm meeting regularly with the senior management there, and to use their words 2 weeks ago, they are at breaking point right now. In one school, 5 members of, sorry, there was a catering team of 7 and 5 members were off isolating. How the 2 members of staff actually served food to the pupils on that day, I have no idea. But we currently have about 60 members of staff off ill or with COVID, cleaners, and we've got 150 close contacts. We're out to advertise to another 100 for another 100 cleaners. And the last time we did that last year, we only got 40, hence the fact that electrostatic fogging was introduced. I can't see us getting another 100 cleaners at the low rate of pay that cleaners are paid in local authorities. But it is a factor that we're keeping a close eye on now, because we have heard that there's been a reduction in school cleaning. And in 1 or 2 cases, Queensferry being one of them, there was a time where there was no cleaning at all.
Okay, and that is yet another mitigation that has to carry on, is good cleaning. It feels a bit like we're leaving this meeting in 4 or 5 minutes on a negative note. We've certainly heard during the session of things that we should be doing. It seems to me, I don't know, Claire and Nikki, whether you agree with this, I wonder if we should be saying something to the Scottish Government about these school inspections, or is it too late?
No, it's not too late.
Never too late.
I can tell you our local association is considering whether to go to grievance with Education Scotland. Now, we don't even know if we can do that. So we're trying to take guidance from national.
You certainly can. Any school can raise a grievance. You just need 2 people to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe, I don't know whether it's not legitimate. This isn't a Trades Council meeting, but it might be something that we as a meeting would like to ask the Trades Council to consider, whether you know, they could make representations to the Scottish Government on this.
That would be very much appreciated. Thank you. I think, I don't know about you, Claire, but I think anything that helps would be would be great.
And
I
also,
think we're going to talk about it executive tomorrow, Nikki, so I'll let you know what they say.
and also anybody who is in not in the education union, but you know, other unions, whether it would be in solidarity worth, you know, putting motion, you know, unions taking some action on that, because it just feels like one too many, doesn't it?
Well, it actually feels like it would cause harm rather than improvement, and that's for me, that's the cutting point. If it's going to cause harm, it should not be done, and that comes from my staff as well, because we know we're under cost for that. It's one step too far.
Okay, and I think we have other action points that individual unions can take, or reps can take, that David has suggested and that Des has suggested, but that might be one that we could collectively do. So anything that anyone else would like to add? Do any of the speakers want to have a last word? No? Okay.
Not really, thanks. Thanks for inviting me along, and apologies that I was late.
No,
so
well, you weren't late. We hadn't come to you yet.
All right, okay, good.
Okay, well, can I thank the Trades Council and Des and everybody for organising the meeting, and thank all of you for coming, and thank our speakers, and see you again at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, cheers.
Thanks, Patty. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Kathy.